Welcome to LakeSmart and this session on landscape management. My name is Susan Jason and I'm a landscape designer in Northwest Arkansas. I've been designing residential landscapes for about a decade now in a 3-state area. I too have lived on a lake in Arkansas for 17 years now, and I fully appreciate the challenges and joys of lake living. I hope you'll learn from some of my experiences and enjoy planning your landscaping through the LakeSmart program. Treating your property and our environment with respect is just good old-fashioned stewardship. Being green is certainly the in thing today, and that was also true nearly 50 years ago. It's only natural that we protect the lake environments that we enjoy, particularly our waterways. I believe that lake living naturally calls its residents to at least a heightened awareness and ultimately to good landscape management practices. Sustaining our environment just makes sense. Since you're living on a lake, there are some extra challenges that we all typically face. Let's outline the challenges first. These may include steep hillsides, erosion control as accomplished in the dry creek bed seen here, rocks, soil, or more often lack thereof, just rocks and more rocks, critters such as the occasional deer, or as is my experience, herds of deer, as well as the rabbits, coons, and more. And then us humans. When we clear a site for construction, we totally disrupt the environment and trigger all kinds of problems as we try to reestablish nature's setting. Loss of root mass as well as soil compaction during construction are just two ways we create additional challenges for ourselves. Mother Nature teaches us many lessons that we should use to learn about our lakeside environments. Lots of trees help to slow the heavy rains as the rain is filtered through the density of the tree canopy. Then there are lots of leaves on the woodland floor that serve as a natural mulch and also return nutrients to the soil, not to mention understory trees that are well adapted to filtered sunlight. Then there is the diversity of wildlife and plant life that thrive in our woodland and meadow areas, and the microclimates that support life. Whether we realize it or not, all these elements support erosion management as well as improving our water quality and are all good reasons to keep in mind when designing landscaping for your lake home. As we start thinking in 3 dimensions about slope, let's first define slope in a way that we can communicate about. A little vocabulary. First, there is the rise. The rise is the height or vertical distance of a particular section of a hillside. The run is the length or horizontal distance across that area. If you divide the rise by the run, that gives you what is called the slope, or often termed the percent of slope. For example, a 1% slope would be 1 foot of rise or height of change over 100 foot of run or horizontal distance. The drawing here shows the rise and run of a hillside. A 1% slope is also about the same as 1 1/4 inch rise per 10 linear feet of distance. Now that we've defined rise, run, and slope, and you know how to figure the slopes on your property, there are some standards. These are good guidelines for managing drainage when you're trying to understand your sloping yard and what are reasonable solutions if it's too steep. I call this Civil Engineering 101. Typically, a ground surface such as a lawn is best at a 1% to 10% slope. You never want a totally flat area because then it will not drain. A planting bed should slope at about 2 foot per 100 foot or 2% minimum to provide some drainage. If you have a wooded area that is planted, if it is over 8% slope, then the mulch will likely start washing in heavy rains. And at a 10% slope or 1 foot of vertical height per 10 foot in horizontal distance, you may likely have erosion. Use extreme caution when you start mowing on a slope over 15%. I never recommend it. Turns are often difficult and mowing becomes very dangerous and can even be deadly. But back to some more standards to think about. Walkways. If you're walking up a long slope that seems to be steep, it probably is greater than a 5% slope. So first of all, know your property. Do some basic measurements and apply some basic standards as you begin to plan your landscape. There are some additional standards for slopes for driveways, outdoor surfaces, as well as ramps. When a driveway exceeds the 8% slope, car doors can become difficult to keep open or slam shut on you, depending upon whether you're parked uphill or downhill on the slope. One additional factor that is important to know is when to change from sloping an area to terracing or creating steps through the area. There are also standards for the stairs that are helpful. First, we must know the parts of a stair. The rise or riser, just as in the slope we discussed, is the vertical height. The tread, when we talk about stairs, is the horizontal distance, similar to the run that we just talked about for a hill or a slope. To design stairs, there is an easy formula to follow. 2 times the rise plus 1 tread should equal 26 inches. There are 2 examples shown here. One is when you're working with the idea of having a certain amount of rise, such as 6 inches. The other example is when you're trying to achieve a certain amount of distance, such as creating a tread of 15 inches. The rise on stairs is typically between 5 inches and 7¼ inches high, and best at about 5½ inches to 6½ inches in the outdoor setting. Be sure to keep the dimensions consistent throughout a set of stairs. You will need to adjust the rise and run depending upon your slope and limiting factors such as trees or structures. The steps shown may fit the site visually, but they are difficult to walk because they are uneven and do not follow the standards just described. With a little more care in construction, they could have worked well. Ideally, you don't want more than 10 risers in a sequence without a break, and never, never, never design a single step, a single riser, or a single transition with only 1 riser unless you change the materials or you change the direction of the decking material. It's almost given that 1 step will become a significant tripping hazard. Now let's take a short break. Discuss how having a better understanding of your lake site will impact the decisions regarding landscaping for your home.
Pause the video now.
Welcome back. Now let's review some solutions for steep and rocky slopes. They generally fall into 2 categories: hardscape, which is the built backbone of a landscape design, and secondly, there is the softscape, or the plants used in the design. First of all, there are many hardscape options, particularly for terracing through a slope. Whether it's a gentle slope that you are managing, a steep slope, or just the desire to build a raised bed for plantings, this information on terracing is applicable to all. First, there are the segmented walls. These are manufactured units, usually out of concrete. Follow the directions exactly and be sure your wall is built to a manufacturer's specifications. There are too many tales of woe from an inexpensive contractor or an owner who didn't follow the specifications exactly, and the walls collapse. Terracing can also be achieved by dry stacked stone walls. Typically, these are under 2 foot to 3 foot in height. It is not unusual for these to shift a little over time, particularly when built of small or medium-sized stones. Be sure to stagger seams to provide better stability. The true test of a master stonemason is the test of time for these walls. When building stone walls out of large stones or boulders, always enlist the services of a professional with excellent references. You can insert boulders through the slope to provide accent, as well as to manage the terrain, to prevent erosion, and to control drainage. Even add a water feature, or if you're lucky enough, utilize a natural water course on your property. Timber walls are also a great way to manage a slope. Each material has its own unique cost-benefit qualities. Generally, it seems the less costly, the shorter the life of the build feature. This is where owners must balance short-term costs versus long-term costs, and of course, budgets. Phasing is always a good way to achieve successful landscape for the long term while managing immediate costs. Concrete walls and stairs are another way to terrace through a slope. Often walls are veneered with various products from brick to stucco, or even left as plain concrete depending upon the application and the style you're seeking. Choosing the materials you desire is closely tied to your site and the architecture of your home, as well as your budget. Remember, too, that local building codes, property owner association covenants, as well as Army Corps of Engineer requirements all must be followed when applicable. And a most significant factor often overlooked is tree preservation through the construction process. This is one area that needs more attention by both owners and contractors. Barbed wire protective fencing during construction is an excellent deterrent to encroaching on a tree's root system. The most common mistakes are not considering an overall plan to guide you, underestimating water and its potential effects, not following directions, and not looking at both short and long-term costs, remembering that a little bush today will grow. And finally, but not least of all of the common mistakes, is not keeping in mind maintenance when planning a landscape. The fourth area in a landscape is the plants themselves. Others have talked about trees and turf. Because of woody sites and slopes, we'll review some alternatives with regard to softscape. Remember that maintaining a good mulch at 3-inch depth is as important as your plant selection. These are some of the ground covers that are particularly good for wooded sites or large slopes. Winter creeper euonymus is evergreen, and it turns slightly purple in winter. In some areas, it is becoming invasive with unmanaged growth, so use this plant with caution. It's generally deer-resistant, but there is really no plant completely deer-proof when populations are high and food supplies are scarce. It grows in areas from full sun to full shade. Vinca minor, or periwinkle, is another evergreen ground cover. Low-growing with blue blooms in spring, it favors shade or part shade. It is very deer-resistant and grows at a moderate pace. Invasiveness is not a problem at all. Don't forget about ferns and moss as other alternatives for ground covers, particularly as seen here, finding their home among the rocks with the periwinkle in bloom. Virginia creeper is a native plant and a good ground cover. Keep in mind that it will also grow up walls and trees. It turns a beautiful bright red in the fall. Ajuga reptans, or bugleweed, is evergreen and grows well in part shade. It is known for a showy blue-purple spike of color in the spring, and it too is generally deer-resistant. Ajuga will seed into areas of the landscape downslope from where you have originally planted it. It also grows much like strawberries, sending out babies following bloom. To me, Pachysandra, also known as spurge, is an underused ground cover. I would guess that is the case because it grows very slowly, and typically we want things to happen pretty quickly. It's great in that it has a wonderful texture, is evergreen, and is very deer resistant. It has small, inconspicuous flowers in spring, and it will spread over time. Liriope, or monkey grass, or lily turf as it is also called, and mondo grass, also shown here, are two ground covers that thrive in about any environment. The variegated form of liriope is seen here. Don't confuse it with some of the sedges, which are also very, very fast spreading. Mondo grass here is the shorter green tuft. There is also a dark black-green selection that is most interesting. Remember, too, that there are both spreading and clumping forms of liriope. Be sure you are buying the plant with the characteristics you desire. English ivy. Well, most people have a love-hate relationship when it comes to English ivy. Evergreen, fast-growing, and almost invasive when established. It can be used as a very effective ground cover where nothing else will seem to grow. And let's not forget the lowest growing ground cover, moss. It's nature's way of putting green on the toughest soils and sites. A thick mat of moss is delightful to walk in, and its erosion control benefits are wonderful. Creeping junipers are available in a variety of forms, from very low-growing to very tall. The low-growing evergreens are good ground covers and generally spread about 6 foot to 8 foot wide, depending upon type. They like it hot, sunny, and are great water-wise plants. Let us also not forget ferns, one of nature's woodland floor plants. Natives are making a strong statement these days. Some are evergreen too. They're available in a huge range of textures, greens, and heights. A massed area of ferns can be spectacular. Remember that perennials are also another great way to provide color and root mass. Many are native to Arkansas. Most prefer full sun, but a few will tolerate part sun or even part shade. As you consider planting areas of your landscape, don't forget the benefits of mulch. Keep it 3 inches deep to maximize water retention in the soil, as well as discourage weed growth. Don't forget about native perennials. There are too many to mention here, but certainly a wonderful addition to any landscape. They're not maintenance-free, but they provide wonderful seasonal color. Natives usually take a year or two to get well established. In addition, don't be surprised if you have only modest or no luck if transplanting from the natural woodland to a new setting in your yard. Natives are native because they're adapted to a particular climate. You have to match their microclimate in their new location. Remember, too, harvesting plants from state and national parks or core areas is illegal. In another session, you will have reviewed trees. Here is a quick overview of some of the native shrubs and trees that you might want to consider for your landscape. To get the most for your landscape dollar, remember the growth characteristics of the plants you select. Match their qualities to where you plan to plant them. Where required for good plant development, remember that the soil and soil preparation are critical to a successful garden. Never put a $5 plant in a $1 hole. Rather, invest $5 in soil and preparation and purchase the $1 plant. It will look like a $5 plant in no time. You'll find a list of resources that I find helpful for gardening in Arkansas and some basics on landscaping in your materials. Always remember the University of Arkansas Cooperative Extension Service and its website. It's a great source for the latest and best for gardening in Arkansas.